There's an idea that is this book, and that idea is Lovecraftian horror clad in spy thriller literature with a large dose of British humor. To be honest, I literally just stole that quote from the patron that picked this book for me to read this month. And to be honest, if I had to pick a better description of this book, I probably couldn't do it if I tried. Anyway, so the Patreon pick for this month is The Atrocity, Archives by Charles Stross, picked by Grey Malk. And to be fair, this book could have gone bad at any point during the reading process. And that wouldn't even be the book's fault. That would really be just more me bouncing off of the book because it just isn't necessarily my type of thing, or at least if I were to have read some descriptions and looked into it, I wouldn't have necessarily gone for that particular style of book. Luckily, I'm happy to say that that is not the case. I actually quite found myself enjoying the book as I was reading it, and to be honest, this book is way better than it has any right to be. Now, first things first, this book is a comedy. From page 1, it is intended to be funny. And that, once again, as far as my personal taste is concerned, was my first big red flag, because me and comedy in books don't necessarily get along. More often than not, we don't get along. Actually, as a matter of fact, it's just harder to translate comedy in written form than it is, say, other mediums like even manga or movies, TV shows, stuff like that. Even movies and TV shows, I'll bounce right off of the comedy a lot of the times. I don't know, I just tend to have these like real grumpy old man yelling at cloud vibes as I go through life. I do tend to like British comedy a little bit more than I like American comedy. I think that's just because they're a little bit more cynical in their outlook, and American comedy seems to be a little bit more slapstick. I mean, just to give you an idea of the way my mind works, I will literally be belly laughing at some of the dialogue in Philip K. Dick's books because of the way he writes dialogue between characters. And then I will read a Joe Abercrombie book and I will find very little humorous in it. But then again, with all that being said, this is intended to be funny, and for the most part, it absolutely succeeds in that. And then I think that is because it is British comedy. Like I said, that is something I do tend to favor more than other types. And that's not to say that this is like 100% perfect, because there is a lot of little weird beats in there. Like, for example, the main character's roommates are literally named Pinky and the Brain. And there is a certain point in the book where they literally are like quoting the catchphrases from the 90s cartoon to each other. And I'm like, that's a bit much. For me, anyway. Anyway, like I said earlier, this book was literally way better than it had any right to be. And I say that not because the comedy actually worked in the book. That actually really has kind of nothing to do with it. Why I actually say that is literally just the writing itself. This book is just very smartly written. And I mean that both in like the actual language that he's using when he's describing the computers and the technology and the theories and all of the things that he's going to get into. He gets kind of deep into some, I don't even know. There was some stuff I wasn't even following as he was going through. I'm like, oh Lord, dude. You can tell that an intelligent person wrote it just by what is being tackled, the way it's being tackled, and the language that he's using as he's discussing it. Then on top of that, it's just smartly written in the plotting, in the way that it's put together, in the way that it's structured, in the way that it's paced. It's just a very intelligently written book. I was extremely impressed. Then there's the prose and maybe not the prose, but the authorial voice of the piece. And it's a very well put together story and a very well put together book in the actual writing. And then I'll go ahead and mix all of the Lovecraftian stuff into the fact that it's a very smart book, because he's going to then take Lovecraftian horror and occult and demons and magic and mythology, all these different things. He's kind of smash them together, and he's going to ultimately have to create a reason why this all goes together and a logic to how that goes together and how it functions. And it works. It really came out on the right side of where it needed to land for it to work narratively and in your brain, if that makes any sense whatsoever. And then on top of all of that crazy that I just said, he at no point in the writing process lost sight of the fact that the book's just supposed to be fun to read. Now, at no point would I mistake this book for high fiction. It's not some type of masterpiece that stands head and shoulders above other literature or anything like that. But I would not be surprised if somebody were to tell me that this is one of their favorite series and they just enjoyed the shit out of it. It's like an auto buy thing. Every time the next book comes out, they just grab it and they just have a good old time reading it. Or maybe even more so if somebody were to be like, you know what, this is my favorite palate cleansing book, which is, you know, for me, to be quite honest, that's kind of like my Vampire Hunter D books. If I get done reading some big chunky, you know, Game of Thrones or some big hard hitting thing, and I just need to cleanse my palate before I move on to some crazy other big piece of literature, go grab an Atrocity Files. That would make perfect sense. I could see somebody saying that and I would not bat an eye. I'd be like, yep, that tracks. And then on top of all of that, the characters are good, the characters are fun, and the characters are engaging to read. They all have like a flair and a flavor to them. They're not bland or dry. They really have their own personalities to them. They all stand out in the story, especially Bob, of course, being our main character, but he's got such a strong voice in and of himself that really just carries you through the book and carries. I had a blast just going on these two little journeys with him. Actually, this is kind of two books in one. It's one book, but it's like there's an extra novella tacked on to the end of it. I didn't realize that when I bought it. So it's like the Atrocity Archives, and then Concrete Jungle is a separate story that's mixed in there. They're both great. I mean, it, and with how little it is, oh man, you'll blow through it in no time flat. Anyway, like I was saying, just really good stuff. And I would probably say that this book sits right around a 7. It's not like 8, 9, 10 really good, great territory, but if 5 is straight down the middle of the road average, this is definitely above average, and I had a good old time with it. I would absolutely give it right around a 7. Anyway, everybody, as always, the link for my Patreon's in the description below. The link for my Discord's in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.